Bakugo is my second favorite character in My Hero Academia. You thought I was gonna say first favorite, didn't you? Well, if I talk about my favorite so-and-so from insert show or game every week, I'm gonna run out of things to say before you know it. So might as well branch out to yammer on about those silver and bronze medals who probably have earned at least a little of my attention in this life. And before you ask, this is my best boy. I have loved him ever since the first episode he showed up in, and my flame of love for him will never go out. If you want all of my opinions on who is who and who gets my love, here you are. You can have that too. 1 through 5 are my loved characters, 6 through 10 are characters I like, 11 through 15 are characters I don't mind, and 16 through 20 are characters I don't like. Get it? Got it? Okay, good. So, Katsuki Bakugo is a weird case, don't you think? I mean, not many characters seem to split people like Bakugo does, since most people end up arguing on whether or not he deserves to be rooted for and liked, or if he deserves to be put in the trash and never allowed back out. Well, I think you can tell from my giving him the title of second favorite that he's more or less earned his spot amongst at least my favorite characters in the show. Whenever I'm discussing Hiroaka with people, I tend to defend Bakugo both as a well-written character and as an understandable human, because although he's a big dick and definitely not the nicest person around, I'd argue that he not only works as hard as everybody else around him, but that Bakugo is the way he is because of the world of My Hero Academia. So today we're going to be examining Bakugo as a character, to look at his current tenure through the Hiroaka anime. Sorry guys, I'm not a manga kind of girl, so I'll only be discussing anime stuff, to see why he's not only a great character, but somebody who really isn't as rotten as people paint him as, simply because he was bred to see the world exactly the way that he does. When you begin to think about the world of Hiroaka for even just a minute, it's not hard to see the cracks in how it works, because although living in a world where nearly everybody has a superpower sounds like a lot of fun, this isn't exactly a world where you can just have a power and be a hero. The entire world is built on marketing and on the inherent impressiveness of one's quirk to suit specific niches. If you have a good quirk, like Todoroki or Bakugo, you're gonna go far, kid, and it's only because you happen to win the quirk lottery. If you're more on the Deku spectrum of things, society isn't exactly going to be kind to you. You get to be a salary man or work some dead-end job that you hate for the rest of your life. Because if your quirk doesn't show up, or doesn't provide immediate usefulness, or hold some impressiveness that could be used for hero work, you're just not going to be somebody. And because of this, quirks almost govern the entire way the world works. Because if you have one of the great powers, you better get your butt over to hero school to begin preparing for a future in heroic duty, because that's what you owe to society for being born with such a power. Sorry, Deku, you just don't have what it takes, but people like Todoroki or Yaoyorozu are going to be allowed into UA on recommendations alone, because a quirk like theirs simply cannot be wasted and not utilized. For Bakugo, this very thing happens, because when his quirk emerges, he's immediately admired, is immediately told of what and who he could become if he were to hone this power that he's born with. He rolls the quirk dice, is born with this incredible power, and all of a sudden he goes from Bakugo, normal child, to Bakugo, future hero and holder of a quirk that is admired by both his classmates and his teachers. And I mean, of course this goes to his head a little bit. Have you ever met a little kid? If you one day tell them that they're destined to be all of these great things simply because of something they were born with, why wouldn't they begin to believe it? I mean, little kids are the champions of telling you every good thing about themselves, because the very thought of an adult finding them impressive is just too good to pass up. For Bakugo, this is no exception, because the more he begins to hone his quirk, the more only one path is set out for him. He's gotta be a hero, everybody can see the potential in him, and there simply is no other options for him. Even if he wanted to get out of this perspective life, he couldn't. And if he's going to be a hero, he's going to try his very best to act like one. Of course, this becomes pretty misconstrued in his head, because from his flashbacks watching All Might in combat, he's admiring something completely different from Deku. While our freckled main character admires All Might for his ability to save people while smiling, to seem fearless in the face of doom, and to continue to protect whoever needs him, what Bakugo admires is All Might's seemingly unending strength. The fact that he can fight multiple enemies at once and continue going without the slightest falter in that signature smile of his. For Bakugo, the child told his future based solely on his own quirk, if he's going to be a hero like All Might, then he needs only pure strength, because there is nothing else to his favorite hero than that. Naturally, that isn't the case at all, but for little Katsuki, this makes perfect sense. If he's to be a hero, he must be the strongest he can be, because All Might is the strongest, and he happens to be the #1 hero. This is why Bakugo refuses help from Deku during the flashbacks of them playing, why he's more or less insulted by Deku trying to help him after he falls into the water. For Bakugo, this is probably the biggest insult, the biggest blow to his pride in a way that would only make sense to him. Deku is just trying to help him up, to be a good friend and to try and emulate All Might by ensuring the safety of his friend. But the vast difference in heroism by Deku and Bakugo is clear. Deku, now that it's obvious he's never going to develop a quirk, isn't going to be a hero and isn't exactly somebody society values in the long run. But here he is rushing down to check on Bakugo, a kid supposedly destined to be a hero, and in his mind, this means that Deku is insinuating that he isn't strong enough, that he's too weak to withstand a tumble like this, and by extension, unfit to be a hero. And if he's not strong, he cannot be like All Might, and that's the only person he wants to be. Sure, it's not nice of him to treat Deku the way he does, but he's a little kid, and with the fragile ego he has, I can at least understand why he makes this choice. So, flash forward to the very end of middle school, and our spiky-haired hellhound is getting ready to apply to UA High School. You know, the most prestigious high school for heroes there is. He's cocky, full of himself, and still simply cannot stand Deku for even a minute. The fact that Deku continues to try and make peace with him only seems to further drive Bakugo mad, because Deku continues to reject the role that the world has chosen for him. A hero is born, not made, but here is this kid who was born without a quirk, who continues to try and push himself up towards the front, with the people who were made for this kind of life. Telling Deku to kill himself, now that's not something I can back up, and the only justification I can give for it is that we all say some pretty stupid things when we're in middle school, and I'm sure most of us would say that our mid-teenager self does not reflect who we are now that we're grown up and living in an all-new hell outside hallways and lockers. The encounter with the slime villain is probably Bakugo's first kick in the jaw, the first time his world has been challenged and questioned, since up until this point, everybody has existed only to further cement his beliefs and opinions. He's attacked and held captive by the villain, and although he fights back, he's unable to defeat him, only really finding enough strength to keep him at bay, to keep him from being consumed even though he can't exactly hold out forever. His strength and the quirk that'll turn him into a hero simply aren't enough in this situation. He cannot do something like this alone. But the pro-heroes simply stand by, stunned and unsure of what to do in this situation, more or less completely failing him when it comes to doing what their intended purpose is supposed to be. So instead of the pros, who comes running in but Deku, the legit definition of everything Bakugo has been bred to see as worthless, because of the lens that society views him through. Here he is, future-born hero with a power that left him with only one option for who he should ultimately become, being saved by Deku, a quirkless person who can't possibly have the same fate that he would. If only one path to becoming a hero is through strength, then how is he supposed to be one if he's saved by a person who is deemed useless in their world? All Might wouldn't have needed rescuing by somebody who society didn't want or need, and neither should he. But here Deku is, rushing into the situation to try and save Bakugo, simply because he looked like he needed help. This only further boils his hatred of the freckled kid, since this unintentional insult comes to force Bakugo to question the world he's been born into, and how it's raised him up until this point. This is only made worse when Deku actually gets into UA, because while Bakugo was expecting this to be the end of everything, it's merely the beginning. Suddenly, not only does Deku appear in the place Bakugo was born to be at, but he's got a quirk, something that he was seemingly hiding from everybody. If he was supposedly worth something in this world, in this society, wouldn't he have shown it to everybody beforehand? It's just not right, and for Bakugo, he's simply not going to accept that Deku suddenly wants to stand on equal ground with him after being nothing short of trash beforehand. So when he gets a chance to go toe-to-toe with Deku in the 7th episode, under the guise of a training exercise where he and Ida are supposed to be playing the roles of villains protecting a bomb, Bakugo doesn't wait a moment before rushing right into the hallways in an attempt to destroy Deku. Actual point of the hero exercise be damned, he's going to fight Deku to prove once and for all that his philosophy of heroism is correct, and that his worldview is still true to form. So King Explosion Murder stomps through the hallways, screaming his little head off, until Deku ultimately shows up and the two get to fight together for the very first time in the show. It's raw power and years of being told his purpose versus brain power and years of being told he was worthless. And if they were fighting using quirks alone, Bakugo would probably win, but we aren't doing that, because Deku's years of studying heroes comes around to bite Bakugo in the butt, as he blocks a punch and flips him over onto his back. Not only this, but Deku basically further spits in Bakugo's face, by declaring that the cruel nickname he's been living with, another way that Bakugo could further label his place in society, meant something positive and uplifting, allowing Deku to declare his philosophy of heroism as being better than Bakugo's. And of course, Bakugo takes this about as well as you would think, by throwing a giant temper tantrum and blowing up half of the dummy building with an overpowered gauntlet in a fit of pure rage. He's not ready to let his entire world crumble, even if this means pitching the biggest hissy fit known to man, and oh boy does he! Because the very next episode, we're made not only privy to his previously discussed childhood, but we get to watch as he cries when All Might attempts to address the situation. Of course, we're not going to see Bakugo openly express himself, but it's clear that his entire understanding of the world is being thrown out into outer space, and that trying to forge a new one isn't exactly something he's going to do unless he's pushed to the ultimate extreme. There isn't much to say about the USJ arc in terms of Bakugo, although I really do like the fights and it did cement Eraserhead as my favorite of the adult characters. I'm just gonna skip it for now. Maybe I'll go back to it someday if I ever want to talk about my best boy in his own video. So, second season rolls around and we get to my favorite staple of shonen, the tournament arc, where Bakugo has some interesting developments as a character. Up until this point, Bakugo has been a one-man show, seeing himself as nothing more than the only person worth looking at, and the only person he needs to look out for. Naturally, this isn't at all how heroes work, and this is the arc to teach him this. Before the tournament proper even begins, Bakugo's internal flames are lit, when Todoroki, one of the students with a quirk so impressive he didn't even need to take the placement test, sets his sights on and challenges Deku, vowing not to lose and to win the entire tournament himself. While Deku is mortified about the whole situation, Bakugo is insulted. Looking at it from the lens of how, through expectations and the society he's lived in, Todoroki should be the most threatened by him. His quirk is incredible, he was told he'd be a hero, and he has become the one to fulfill his reason for existing. But here Todoroki is, insinuating that Deku is somehow stronger and overall more of a threat to the hero rankings than Bakugo. And I mean, hey, Bakugo isn't stupid. He has the third highest midterm test scores for a reason. I mean, he's gotta be studying pretty hard if he's getting better grades than our egghead Deku. With this unintentional insult lit under his ass, Bakugo has, in his mind, no other choice than to cement why he's the one everybody needs to be looking at and feel rivalry or intimidation towards. And this is what leads him to put himself onto the podium for his customary speech as the student who placed first on the placement exam, to plop himself in front of the mic and declare that he's going to be number one. No dancing around the topic or even pretending he cares about what others want. No, He's going to fulfill his singular given purpose by proving once and for all that his heroic philosophy is the truth. There's simply no other way for him. The relay race begins, and it's every man for himself, meaning that Bakugo is gunning for first place and, by extension, Todoroki. The two basically spend the entire race chasing each other's heels. Bakugo figuring doing exactly that will cement him as the person Todoroki should actually be watching, the person he should be paying attention to, and the person worthy of being a rival and adversary. It's just as he declared, he's going to be number one. There's just no two ways about it for him. And this whole mess is made all the worse by the fact that it isn't Todoroki or Bakugo that takes first place in the relay, but a surprise upset by Deku of all people. This is, well, not exactly what Bakugo was looking for, since it more or less cements everything Bakugo was trying to prove the opposite of, because suddenly Deku is the center of attention, the person with the most points, and overall the most noticed. Supposedly quirkless, unwanted by society Deku is the person that everybody is paying attention to instead of the born-to-be hero Bakugo, and he can't exactly accept that, now can he? As badly as he wants to beat Deku's face in for daring to take the slot he wanted for himself, this isn't exactly the point of the second event, with it instead being a cavalry battle, meaning that working alone simply isn't an option. Nope, he needs a team, and although he's his reluctant, pissy self in the beginning, he does eventually assemble a pretty useful team, composed of Kirishima in the front for defensive power, and Sero and Mina in the back to provide quick entrances and escapes. All things considered, he could have built a team only of who seemed to be the most inherently powerful, since that does align more with his stance on things. But instead, there is a team built with genuine strategy and consideration for what he needs to crush Deku and Todoroki. Naturally, this doesn't keep him sticking with the team for every second of the fight, since this is Baby's first teamwork, but he ultimately manages to pull out a victory for himself and the entire team, sending him into the tournament of the tournament arc. Imagine that. And here we have the fight that turned me into a filthy Kochako shipper. Made me love Bakugo as a character, because his fight with Uraraka is a masterpiece for both of the characters. From the get-go, it's a bit of an unfair match, since every time we've seen Uraraka, we've understood that she doesn't have the best handle on her quirk. She's not exactly combat strong, and the mere idea of her going toe-to-toe with Bakugo scares her and all of her friends shitless. She's gotten this far though, and since she's also riding the Deku train of inspiration, there isn't anything she wants to do but try her best to win a seemingly doomed fight. But the thing that fascinates me the most about this fight is how Bakugo handles the whole thing, because instead of treating Uraraka like she's delicate or unworthy of facing head-on, like Deku or Ida would have done if they'd been fighting her, Bakugo knows full well that she deserves a legitimate fight. That she's come this far, and as a fighter, it would be nothing short of an insult to her to treat her as lesser than him. In fact, she's the first character he actually uses the name of, skipping the cruel nickname and giving her the respect of her actual name, further cementing that he takes this fight seriously and is not going to baby her. Although it's heartbreaking to watch Uraraka ultimately lose, it's more impressive to see Bakugo make the jump from uncaring and desperate only to cement himself, like in the first season fight with Deku, to see him fighting respectfully but aware, as his explosions halt any time Uraraka is down, waiting until she either gets up to continue or halting the battle entirely when she's finally too weak to fight back any longer. Bakugo is crass, he's chock full of awful things to say to people, and sometimes the little whelp needs a muzzle. But the only thing he isn't is somebody who's going to treat you as lesser in the field of combat. Every fight is about giving it everything you have. It's about putting all of your strength on the table and expecting the same from whomever you're fighting in that moment. Sure, he wants to and is going to do everything in his power to win, but the thing that Bakugo values the most in a fight is knowing that all of their strength is going to be put on the table. Heroes are about their strength and their ability to take out as many people as possible without showing weakness, and Bakugo is destined to be a hero. This comes to a head when the finals roll around, when Bakugo is finally pitted against the person who inadvertently insulted him and who he's been desperate to prove himself to from the moment this arc really began. But unfortunately for King Explosion Murder, Todoroki is right off the heels of his fight with Deku, and isn't exactly in the right place emotionally or mentally to give it his all in this fight. No, in fact, Todoroki is utilizing a lot more of his overall power and strength when fighting Deku, and this breaks something in Bakugo when he ends up defeating Half Cold, Half Hot, because in his mind, this isn't at all a victory. They can put a medal around his neck, they can call him the winner, but that simply isn't the case in this situation, because that fight wasn't Todoroki's all. He half-assed it. He was barely there mentally or physically, and this made him easy to defeat. Bakugo's victory wasn't earned. He didn't get a chance to cement his true strength and prove himself as worthy hero material. He declared that he'd be number one, but if being in first was all that this was about, he wouldn't be so obviously angry about how everything ended up. He'd have accepted the prize and been on his merry way, boldly cementing that he was correct and that Todoroki never should have doubted him. But, well, let's just say if he was truly happy about the whole situation, he wouldn't have had to be muzzled and chained down just to accept first prize. I mean, geez, he's even willing to snap at All Might, his hero and the person he looks up to more than anybody else in the world, just because he knows he's been wronged in quite a few ways. Bakugo deserved a fair fight. He wanted to earn his way to a gold medal, but instead all he really gets is a weak fight right after Deku got everything Bakugo was supposed to have, the intense clash between Todoroki and himself to cement who was truly meant to be the number one hero. After this, the Stain arc rolls around, and that's more or less built for Ida to finally blossom into my favorite character in the show, meaning that we see Deku and Todoroki helping out their new bestest buddy take out a serial killer in an act of revenge, which, although a great arc, doesn't exactly involve Bakugo in the slightest. He only shows up for the briefest of moments to show where he is spending his time, with the number 4 hero Best Jeanist. I, for the life of me, don't know why Bakugo chose him, but if I had to venture a guess, it would be because of the ranking he holds in the heroic world. Sure, he's no All Might, but you don't just become the 4th greatest hero in the world for nothing. You have to earn it, and well, Best Jeanist has clearly earned his spot. And although we only see them together for a minute, I find that this mentor has quite a lot of knowledge that Bakugo needs to listen to, because as we've learned from the hero name selection episode during the Stain arc, Bakugo is simply too rough to be a publicly adored hero. Throughout the episode showcasing the other 1A students and their mentorships, we're made to understand that being a hero isn't just about protecting people and being strong. It's also about little things, like being in the public eye constantly, or being a likable figure people are going to want to take selfies with or go up to and talk. Being a hero is no different than being a celebrity, and you need to know your audience to thrive in this world. All Might sure as hell knew how to brand himself, and Best Jeanist has it down to a fine art, making him the best person to attempt to teach Bakugo how to be somebody the public will actually like. Naturally, he doesn't exactly care about all this stuff. If he did, he wouldn't have attempted to name himself King Explosion Murder, would he? Although we do get a little glimpse of him attempting to act more along the lines of how Best Jeanist does, even if he does quickly give up and return to his porcupine personality and aesthetic. He's at least attempting to try, even if it's clear he's never going to be the most huggable or advertiser-friendly hero, at least not yet. When the final exam arc rolls around, Bakugo is shoved into a very familiar position, having to deal with Deku during another school activity. Up until this point, they haven't exactly been placed in a combative situation with one another since their original heroes versus villains fight in the first season. However, this time Bakugo isn't fighting Deku, he's working with him. Working with him to defeat All Might. Since this entire final exam situation was constructed by the UA staff in an attempt to ensure the future safety of students, the entire thing is set up with the kids facing a pro hero with the exact counters or weaknesses in reference to their quirks. When it comes to Deku and Bakugo, however, their counter isn't All Might himself, but one another, and how they utterly fail to work with one another for even a moment. After all, fighting All Might when you're in perfect sync with your partner is one thing, but fighting the strongest hero in the world when you would love to kill your partner with your own two hands is just impossible. And yet, Bakugo chooses to neglect trying to strategize with Deku beforehand, simply because he refuses to give the freckled main character a moment of his time or attention. In a way, I can kind of empathize, because it genuinely feels like every time Bakugo attempts to take a step forward, he's shoved to the side to watch the protagonist get whatever it was Bakugo had wanted. Deku got the strongest rival in the form of Todoroki, and he got the true fight at the tournament. Not to mention basically everybody knows All Might favors Deku above all else, even if they don't exactly know why he's the favorite. Every step that Bakugo takes is met by a stride from Deku, and the absolute last thing King Explosion Murder is willing to do is comply with Deku's philosophy or ideas on heroism for the test. Bakugo isn't stupid. All of his grades clearly reflect this fact, but he's had most everything he's ever believed in ripped from him, so he's going to cling to everything he has left in an attempt to keep the core of himself together. Losing everything isn't going to happen. At least, it's not going to happen if he can help it. So they begin their fight with All Might, and everything immediately falls apart, with Deku and Bakugo going in completely opposite directions. Deku's more about just trying to get out of the test field, about finding the escape gate and going through it as quickly as possible to both prevent collateral damage to the cityscape and try not to fight the strongest man the hero world has ever known. Whereas Bakugo is ready to charge headfirst into a fight. After all, strength defines who you are as a hero, and if Bakugo truly wants to be the best hero possible, what could be better for him than to size up and attempt to take out the strongest hero of all? All Might may be his personal hero, the person he's looked up to since childhood, but now that heroism is so close he can almost taste it, it's not hard to see why he's ready to cement himself as the next #1 hero by doing everything he can to take All Might down. And all things considered, Bakugo holds his own way more than he should be able to, probably because of the sheer force of will alone. Even though, while shortly into encountering All Might for the first time, it becomes painfully apparent that winning is simply not going to be an option for him. It becomes painfully apparent to the people watching and Deku, because there's just no way in hell Bakugo is accepting that he's not strong enough to do this. Heroism is about strength. It's about his ability to take out as many people as he needs to, cementing himself as the strongest student at UA and the person who will take over All Might's mantle. In fact, it seems that strength is simply the most important thing to him, period. Because when things reach a boiling point, Bakugo grits his teeth and actually decides to accept working with Deku over failing the test and losing his ability to be considered the strongest among his peers. If swallowing his pride in working with Deku means he can still fight, then that's simply what he's going to do, even if he's not at all happy with having to work with the freckled protagonist. Honestly, maybe Bakugo only allowed the two of them to work together because he knew Deku and him were going to have to fight All Might no matter what, a clean escape having stopped being an option a long time ago, with All Might planting himself before the exit gate, waiting for the two of them to try and make a break for it. Winning is the priority, perhaps because this is a situation where, in Bakugo's mind, Deku's philosophy of helping everybody and being a protector instead of a source of overwhelming power simply isn't useful. This is Bakugo's turf, one of violence and of cementing your strength to prove your superiority over those attempting to oppose you. Because of this, he allows Deku to take his gauntlet, and it's also the reason that Bakugo never gets to finish this fight. Once both of the gauntlets are shattered during the battle, both Deku and All Might become aware of the fact that those deadly grenades weren't just fashionable sweat collectors, but also a cushion to keep him from basically blowing his wrists and hands into a million pieces with the sheer power of his quirk. Using his power while wearing them ensured his safety, but even though he doesn't have them any longer, there is no way he's going to stop fighting for even a second. He's going to win this fight, and if that means he blows one of his wrists out, then so be it. After all, both Ida and Deku have messed up hands by this point, so it's not like Bakugo wouldn't have a club to join of 1A students who understood his pain. But even though it would make him friends, All Might is an educator before he's a fake villain, and there's no way he's allowing one of his students to use his power to send his metacarpals flying into the face of his enemy. Instead, he knocks Bakugo out to prevent him from continuing the fight, leaving Deku not only to exit the fight to give them both a win, but stopping mid-escape to return to grab Bakugo, so that both of them could escape together, cementing his philosophy over Bakugo's once again. Although King Explosion Murder never admits it, I honestly believe that the reason he begins Season 3 so bitterly is because of what happened at the end of the second season. Once again, he's handed this win that he doesn't want, is being told he did something good, even though this isn't at all what he wanted. This isn't how he wanted to cement himself. Instead, he was handed a victory he doesn't feel like he's earned, and once again, this is more or less at the fault of Deku. The difference this time is that Deku went back to save him, making this the second time the freckled protagonist has saved him in the show, and technically the second time he didn't want such a thing at all. More edgy tears are shed, and more All Might wisdom is passed down to a clearly very frustrated Bakugo, who continues to champion his own beliefs on heroism above all else, regardless of what he's going to be told and who is attempting to tell him where his beliefs just might be wrong. Unfortunately for him, however, he is being noticed for the very thing he's attempting to cement, but not by the people he wants to be associated with. The beginning of the summer training camp arc is more or less devoid of any new Bakugo moments, since all we do is see him still being bitter about the outcome of his final exam fight, along with him attempting to work to make his quirk even stronger. But it isn't until the camp is infiltrated that things begin to pick up. During Deku's fight with Muscular, he becomes aware that the reason for the attack on the camp is because the League of Villains is after one thing, Katsuki Bakugo. They've seen his raw power and his capabilities and want to recruit him, want to mold him into something that All for One could use. They see Bakugo the way he wants to be seen, as somebody powerful and beyond useful, as somebody who is strong because of his quirk and how he can use it. And because of this, they're going to do everything in their power to get him. Usually, when the target finds out that they are indeed the target of a mass attack, they'd be terrified and desperate to escape the situation in any way possible. But Bakugo, he's got other ideas on what you do in that kind of situation. He doesn't stop fighting for a moment when faced with the villains, and when Deku, Shoji, Tokoyami, and Todoroki make it all clear he's to be protected and guarded at all costs, he's livid at the unintentional insinuation that he's not strong enough to protect himself while in this situation. He's just not going to sit back and let them protect him, not when it implies that they're more fit to be heroes than he is. Bakugo was born to be a hero, dammit, and his strength is his everything. If he doesn't have that, he's not going to be the hero he's supposed to be. Which is all fine and dandy until Mr. Compress shows up and immediately takes Bakugo out of commission, distilling him to nothing more than an overglorified marble for the rest of the attack. He's only brought back to human form after Kurogiri shows up and failure is clear, Bakugo realizing just what's happening to him as he only sees Deku rushing towards him. If strength is all that matters, then Bakugo has failed as a hero today, and the absolute last thing he needs is for Deku to show up and rescue him with that goofy grin and a "you looked like you needed help" in his voice. So, within those final few moments before he's out of sight, he can only muster up a "Deku, don't come," a final order to make sure that the thorn in his side doesn't dare smash his pride any more than he already has. Bakugo's already had his pride whittled down again and again. The last thing he needs is for Deku to do that again and risk taking all of his pride once and for all. Thus, he tells him not to come, knowing full well that whatever awaits him on the other side of this living gate isn't something he's going to want or enjoy. And he doesn't. Not when they immediately take him and tie him up like an animal, making sure not only to tie him down to a chair without use of any of his limbs, but leaving him gagged and unable to speak. He's offered what they believe would be everything he could possibly want, recognition of his strength and of the vast potentials of such an incredible quirk. He could be so important to them, adored for the one thing he's put his entire life into, the one thing that decided his entire life path and has given him a sense of self. If he became one of them, he'd be adored. He wouldn't have his ways questioned or have to deal with Deku constantly appearing to question everything he's doing and make him feel suddenly like a lesser. Hell, you have to admit, it sounds pretty great. And because of this, the League of Villains is pretty confident that he'll accept their offer and become one of them. But as Eraserhead puts it when being asked about the entire kidnapping situation, they've made a terrible mistake. Although they hit the nail on the head when it came to knowing Bakugo wanted power, wanted to cement himself as being strong, and admired simply for how incredible his quirk was, they failed to understand why he wanted those things, to be like All Might. After all Might tends to be the linchpin that connects everybody to everyone. Those who follow Stain admire All Might for how genuine and unselfish he is. Those who follow Shigaraki detest All Might for the world he's built. And Deku and Bakugo grew up wanting to be just like All Might, albeit different facets of the always smiling hero. So, although they're offering him one of the things he values most, Bakugo knows that accepting their offer would mean throwing away that childhood dream to be somebody like All Might, and there is simply no way he would even consider doing something like that. So, when freed from his bonds and gag, Bakugo wastes no time not only cementing the fact that he'd never join them, but preparing himself for a fight he couldn't possibly win. He knows full well his odds of making it out of the situation alive aren't exactly great, but there's no chance he'd allow himself to join them, even if it means he has to fight a losing battle until his body is simply too broken to continue. He's going to be strong and like All Might. Neither of those things on their own is acceptable. It's either both or nothing at all. Of course, he doesn't have to be alone for too long, not after being freed at least, since he's quickly rescued by All Might and a boatload of other pro heroes. Although he's been petrified through this whole ordeal, only now that he's faced with his mentors and his hero does he let his guard down for a moment, relief washing over him as he realizes his odds of survival are much higher now that he's no longer tasked with fighting an entire barroom of villains single-handedly. Of course, this relief only gets to last a few moments before One For All decides to nope his entire team out of there, including the unconsenting and unwilling Bakugo, who is forced onto the battlefield for the eventual clash between All Might and One For All. It's almost kind of funny that Bakugo and All Might are technically fighting together for a brief moment, and that his fight with Bakugo at his side will ultimately be the last fight Toshinori ever has as All Might. Unfortunately for Bakugo, staying in the fight for long simply isn't an option, not when his presence is preventing All Might from using All For One to the best of his ability, which leads to the ultimate rescuing of Bakugo at the hands of Deku, Ida, and Kirishima. What I find interesting about this one situation is that up until this point, we've seen Kirishima and Bakugo around each other quite a bit since the tournament arc, but after Bakugo is kidnapped, we've been made privy to the fact that the two of them are genuinely friends. That Bakugo has actually broken out of his edgy loner shell and found himself somebody who was not only willing to tolerate him, but genuinely cared for him and wanted to be in his company. He may still be about as cuddly as a pissed-off cat being given a bath, but he's at least beginning to find his people, and a place in this world that isn't simply based on the power of his quirk. And this friendship pays off, since it's ultimately Kirishima who is able to grab onto Bakugo and get him out of the battleground before the clashing tore him to shreds. Operation successful. You've received 1 King Explosion murder for your efforts. From here, well, I'm not exactly a manga reader, so I can only begin to speculate where this is going to go. But I think at minimum, Bakugo refusing to come out of his room during the first episode in the dorms speaks volumes about where he's going to go from here. I think he'll still be the biggest pain in the butt for half of UA, along with being Deku's #1 obsession, but I genuinely believe he's going to hold onto and internalize the fact that All Might lost his quirk and ability to be a hero while rescuing and protecting Bakugo. That his personal hero lost his title and himself, reflecting Deku's philosophy, and that in the end he might be somewhat responsible for what happened. Sure, nobody in the school would blame him. I mean, he clearly didn't defect to join the League of Villains or betray anybody, but I have a good feeling that Bakugo is going to blame himself. that he's going to hold the guilt inside and it's going to fester within him for who knows how long, blackening and rotting before finally bursting out into pure, unadulterated rage, probably directed towards somebody who did not deserve it. I think he'll struggle to come to terms with everything, that it'll leave him in this broken tizzy of a state for a long time, unable to ever really put into words that this anger is more or less guilt and sorrow. Or, who knows, maybe I'm wrong and he'll break into tears and let everybody know he's internalizing all of the self-blame, or maybe he doesn't feel guilty at all. Although, with all the edgy crying he's done in Season 1 and Season 2, I refuse to believe that we're not going to get some Bakugo tears in Season 3. At the end of the day, I can't help but feel like Bakugo is one of the most complex characters in Hiroaka, simply because almost everything he does is so deeply rooted in how he sees the world. Sure, he's basically a cactus with all the spikes he has, but I feel like the moment you ask why he acts the way he does, you can at least understand why he's doing what he's doing, even if it's obvious that he doesn't always have the best intentions while doing them. He's just another confused teenager sticking to his personal code, one who is so set on his path and in his ways that the mere implication that his code might not be right can send him into a fit of cognitive dissonance. I'm not saying he's perfect, just that when you take a moment to dig a little deeper, you can at least see where he's coming from, and that slowly but surely, he's beginning to move in a direction of becoming the just and true hero he was always meant to be.